A single administrative oversight could now cost a landlord up to £7,000. That is the new reality under the Renters' Rights Act, a law that has fundamentally rewritten the rules for 11 million renters across England. Most people believe that Section 21, the so-called no-fault eviction, simply vanished on May 1st, 2026, but the truth is much more complex and, for the unprepared, much more expensive. While the era of no-fault evictions is officially over for new private tenancies, there is a zombie phase for existing notices and a complete exemption for the social housing sector that most people are completely ignoring. By the end of this, you will understand the July 31st deadbolt that could render your current legal notices worthless and the new mandatory ground for possession that carries a 12-month marketing ban if you try to cheat the system. The headline of this reform is the total abolition of the Assured Shorthold Tenancy, or AST, which has been the default rental contract for decades. On May 1st, 2026, the government initiated a Big Bang implementation where almost every existing private tenancy in England automatically converted into something called an Assured Periodic Tenancy. These are rolling tenancies with no end date, meaning the concept of a fixed term where a tenant is locked in for 6 or 12 months is legally dead. For tenants, this means they can now give 2 months' notice to leave at any time, providing a level of flexibility that didn't exist before. For landlords, it means you can no longer rely on a contract simply running out to get your property back. But here is the first shocking fact. According to industry research, roughly 26% of landlords actually served Section 21 notices because their tenants asked them to. These tenants often needed a formal eviction notice just to qualify for social housing vulnerability assessments and avoid being classed as intentionally homeless. Now that this route is gone, there is a massive curiosity gap. How will these vulnerable families navigate a system that no longer allows a friendly, no-fault eviction? The answer lies in the expanded Section 8 framework, which is now the only way for a landlord to regain possession. Because Section 21 is gone, landlords must now cite a specific, evidenced reason, a ground, to end a tenancy. If you want to sell your property, you have to use the new ground 1A. This requires a 4-month notice period and, crucially, it cannot be used during the first 12 months of a new tenancy. But there is a massive warning attached to this. If you evict a tenant under the premise of selling, you are legally prohibited from reletting or even marketing that property for rent for 12 months. This includes putting it on sites like Airbnb. If you are caught breaking this 12-month ban, local authorities can slap you with a civil penalty of up to £40,000. This shift matters because it removes the sword of Damocles that many tenants felt hung over them. Under the old system, a tenant might be terrified to report a leaking roof or a broken boiler for fear of receiving a Section 21 notice in retaliation. Now, revenge evictions are technically impossible because every eviction requires a reason that must be proven in front of a judge. This leads to another major change, the end of the accelerated procedure. Previously, many Section 21 evictions were handled entirely through paperwork without a hearing. Now, almost every contested possession claim will require a formal court hearing where a judge will scrutinize your evidence. For those landlords with in-flight Section 21 notices served before the May 1st cutoff, you are currently in a race against time. Even a perfectly served notice will lapse and become time-barred if you haven't requested a court claim form by July 31st, 2026. If you miss that deadline, your Section 21 notice is legally dead, and your tenant automatically becomes an assured periodic tenant with all the new rights that entails, including the right to request a pet. Speaking of pets, the law has fundamentally shifted the power dynamic here. Tenants now have an implied legal right to request a pet, and a landlord cannot unreasonably refuse. If a landlord does refuse, they must provide a written justification within 28 days. To balance this, landlords can now require tenants to take out pet insurance or pay the landlord back for the cost of maintaining such a policy to cover potential damage. There is also a new protection against rental bidding wars. Landlords and agents are now legally required to publish a specific proposed rent in their advertisements. They are strictly prohibited from inviting, encouraging, or even accepting any offer that is higher than that stated price. This was designed to stop the practice of auctions that were driving up prices in high-demand areas. If you are a landlord who had a tenancy in place before May 1st, 2026, you are sitting on a potential £7,000 landmine. The law required you to send your tenants a government-mandated information sheet by May 31st, 2026, explaining their new rights under the Act. If you haven't done this, you could face a civil penalty, and your ability to use many Section 8 grounds for possession could be barred until you comply. The student market has also been given a very specific lifeline to prevent chaos in the academic calendar. There is a new mandatory Ground 4A, specifically for student HMOs. This allows landlords to regain possession of a property let to full-time students between June 1st and September 30th each year, provided they intend to re-let it to a new group of students. However, this only works if the landlord provided a written statement to the tenants before the tenancy started, warning them that this ground would be used. Finally, for tenants who fall into financial difficulty, the mandatory ground for rent arrears, Ground 8, has become slightly more lenient. A tenant must now be in at least 3 months of arrears, up from 2, before a judge is forced to grant an eviction. Crucially, if those arrears were caused by a delay in the payment of universal credit or other government benefits, the judge cannot evict under this mandatory ground. The key takeaway is that the short-hold era is over. Success now depends on rock-solid evidence, impeccable record-keeping, and a deep understanding of the new grounds for possession. For tenants, it is about knowing that you have the right to challenge above-market rent increases at a tribunal and the security to ask for repairs without fear of an arbitrary eviction. This information is based on the legislation and guidance available in the sources provided and is intended for educational purposes only. This is not legal advice. If you are facing an eviction or planning to serve notice, you should speak to a qualified solicitor or contact Citizens Advice to ensure you are complying with the most current regulations.